Okay, welcome everyone. Sorry about that. Welcome and thank you for joining us this evening. Today is Monday, July 14th, and this is a regular Board of Education meeting. We appreciate your attendance and your participation during the public comment period. Can someone please make a motion to approve the agenda?
I move that the agenda of Monday, July 14, 2014 Board of Education meeting be approved as set forth, and each item is considered ready for discussion and/or action.
Is there a second, please? Thank you. So roll call action.
Director Humbles.
Aye.
Director Rosenthal.
Aye.
Director Witt.
Aye.
Director Westerkamp.
Aye.
President Meisterling.
Aye. Thank you. We're going to start our meeting off with a public hearing regarding the 2014-2015 school calendar. This is the time and place for people to present their feelings and opinions about the conversation that we had 2 weeks ago regarding the calendar, and that would be to replace the early dismissals with full days, or at least some of them with full days, and then the possibility of changing the spring break week. So, Laurel, I ask at this time if you've received any written communication or phone communication?
I received no phone communication, but I did receive 51 responses via either email or Facebook. If the board would like a summary, I would be happy to share that with them.
Yes, can you please?
This is not a scientific research or, yes, this is not a scientific project that I did here, but I wanted to let you know that from the responses that I received, not everyone commented on both issues. Some comments were neutral, some were just questions. Nevertheless, everyone did receive a response from me via email, inviting them to attend this public hearing today and to let them know that I would share the comments with the board members. Regarding spring break, most comments that we received were related to spring break. Of those who commented in favor of retaining spring break as currently scheduled, the reasons were primarily related to family school trips already scheduled and financial investments that had already been made, both personally and by the district. Other items mentioned were the lateness of a decision in changing, unreasonable timing given the fact that a public hearing had already been held on the calendar, and some did state that they would be in favor of moving spring break, but they would like us to wait until the 2015-16 school year to do that. So of the 49 who did, of the 51 who did respond, 27 requested that spring break be retained as scheduled. Those who commented in favor of changing spring break mentioned that they liked aligning the district's break with other metro school districts and area colleges. And of the 49 who did comment, of the 51 who did comment, 13 supported the change this year. As it related to professional development days, of the 51 who responded, 16 said that they would be in favor of collapsing the 6 early dismissal days into 2 full professional development days and moving those days to Friday. Most often mentioned was the fact that childcare was the primary reason and that it was a family-friendly change. Those who were asking to maintain the existing early dismissal professional development days referenced bargaining and para wages as an issue. They thought that we should support best practice as it relates to professional learning communities and the philosophy. And they hoped that we would continue to invest in the district, the fact that we had so much time and investment in the professional learning communities. 6 respondents opposed the change at this time.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. Okay, at this time, I know some of you have filled out a request to address the school board relating to the calendar change. So I invite you to come up now during the public hearing and go ahead and express your thoughts. And if you could please state your name and address for the record, we would appreciate it.
Hi, my name's Heidi Becker. I am associated with Washington High School. I'm the PPA president. That's Patrons of the Performing Arts. We would really, really appreciate it if you did not move spring break. Our show choir invitational called Mo Show, it'll be the 19th year that we've had it, is scheduled for March 14th. If you move spring break up a week, that effectively puts an end to Mo Show for us. We already have 20 schools that have already registered to come to our show choir invitational. And that's not just the Cedar Rapids schools. We have schools in other districts that are coming. And if we move it, they're not going to be able to come. They've already decided what invitationals they're going to and so forth. And Mo Show is a huge fundraiser for the PPA. It brings in over 50% of the funds that we raise to help our performing arts students, not just the show choir, but orchestra, band, drama, speech. I mean, it is just a big group that we help support, and if we can't bring that money in, unfortunately, our students are going to be the ones that are losing out. And so we respectfully ask that you do not move spring break this year. We're more than happy to accommodate it in the next school year and rearrange our schedules for the next, but we really, really would appreciate it if you didn't. The other aspect of moving spring break is our performing arts department does a trip every 4 years. This spring break is the year for that trip, and it's down to Orlando. The plane has already been reserved, hotel rooms have already been made, everything has been planned out and arranged and scheduled, and we're already making payments on that trip for the students that are going. If we have to move it, then we incur penalties, flight penalties, hotels, so forth, and we've already arranged to perform down in Orlando, and if you move spring break up a week, that effectively destroys the entire trip for our students. So we would appreciate it if you did not move spring break this year.
Thank you for your comments. Others?
Yeah, Lawrence Winklowski, 423 Former Railroad, Northeast. Question I'm going to ask, shouldn't there be a display exhibit of the calendar that you want to approve? It would just make sense, especially since the calendar that was in the agenda is not the one that's proposed, but it was the earlier one. Basically, I'm confused about this whole thing. And the reason I'm confused is that when we were making the changes from decision about days to hours, I specifically asked the question of people, can any other changes be made to the calendar? And the people I got from within the district, everyone said, no, we can't. But now here we are changing our mind, and it sort of doesn't make a lot of sense that, you know, we're going from, no, we can't, to, well, let's reconsider that, and that we can't, you know, for whatever reason. As for the changes, I guess one of the things is with going with these half-days and consolidating them, the reason that was given last meeting was because last year when we went over the calendar, some people wanted the earlier, not so many early half-days in the beginning of the year. In particular, they mentioned September 10th because we were talking about in the first 3 weeks of school, there's not one complete week. But that's not something that's being considered here or was proposed. The other thing is, I'd like to know how we came up with these 3 particular days that we want to consolidate. I don't have a problem with the consolidation of that, but I would like to think that they would be spread out more so. That we take one from September, one from October, and one from November or something. Or maybe try to get rid of some of these days between Thanksgiving and the beginning of January, where we try to put 10 pounds of days off and reduce schedules into a 5-pound bag. This calendar, in that particular period is just too crazy. I'd like to see, you use up one of those. The other thing is, with your dates that you're using for April and May, I have to wonder are you aware that the AP tests are May 4th to 8th and May 11th to 15th? Because one of the things that was brought up in the SIAC committee meetings was that, we want to make sure the students get as much time with teachers and that before the AP tests. And to actually put this in the middle of that week, I wonder, is that going to create a problem? I'm just raising the question. I don't have the answer to that. That would be a teacher-dependent situation. But I'd like to, personally, go forward with it. But I'd like to see us use a few little different dates so we spread it out. Because that's the other thing within the SIAC committee they want to do is try to put more space between some of these times off. And this is sort of not necessarily doing that. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Others, please. I'm an address for the record.
Joseph Helly, 1380 Emmons Street in Hiawatha. President Meisterling and directors, thank you for letting me speak tonight. I wanted to address the proposed calendar revisions that the school district is considering for the upcoming 2014 and 15 school year. While I don't have an issue with the changes being considered for early dismissal days, I do have an issue with changing spring break. Being a professional who needs to bid vacation time far in advance, I base my request for the next year on the calendar that the district posted on their website and the flyers that they sent home with kids at the end of the last school year. I think making the changes for this upcoming school year will cause not only conflict for many families, but also thousands of dollars of financial loss to those of us who have already booked spring break trips. Being a family of four with busy schedules, we need to make family plans far in advance to coincide with everyone's schedule. Our children's educational instruction time is very important, and we do plan our trips to minimize any disruption to missing school and rely heavily on the school calendar to make these plans in advance. I know this is the case with many families that I have been in contact with at various school functions over the summer. And just today, I spoke with another person at work, and his daughter is in band at Jefferson High School. And I believe they have a trip planned for Hawaii during that spring break vacation time, and they have a lot of money invested there also. Hopefully you have received and read the comments from others on this topic. With no previous communication that this was even being thought about, I hope you will please consider the impact this will have on many families if you change it for this upcoming year. Aligning it with Kirkwood's spring break makes sense, but since this impacts such a small percentage of the student body in our high schools, my recommendation is that advanced communication on this is going to make it easier for families to plan for the 2015-2016 school year versus this year. Please consider this when voting on this issue tonight. Now I'm going to go off my script a little bit. In my job, we have a limited number of vacation slots that are available. And if you do align it with Linn-Mar and Prairie and Kirkwood, that's going to cut down on the number of our people. I'm a letter carrier, so we can only have a certain number of people off. And we have people from all those school districts. I've been there long enough that I'm going to get spring break. But a lot of our younger carriers, they have kids in school, and they're not going to get that if we do end up going with Prairie and Linn-Mar and Kirkwood's schedule. So please consider that tonight, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Tanya Johnson, 3816 Riverside Drive, Northeast. I would like to speak for my fellow teachers who are obviously enjoying their summer and not replying to any Facebook or email on the changes for the 2014-15 calendar. We don't believe this is the best choice for our students and our own professional learning. The actual hours of professional development may look equal, but when we lose time to meet every other week, this makes the PLC time less effective. We do have time now at all levels during our workday to have PLC time, but we cannot always meet with grade levels or content levels during this time. Professional learning communities is an invested goal of our district, and it is going to be more difficult to meet regularly with the lack of frequent early dismissal days. We understand that the SIAC committee discussed having fewer early release days, but when I shared the new calendar for 2015-16 with a teacher from this committee, he was surprised that this was happening. It seems that maybe this wasn't the top priority of the group, but maybe just one idea discussed. Teachers can handle the changes for 15-16 school year. There is time to plan and time to prepare, but making this change to the 14-15 calendar just months before it takes effect is not the best way to do business. Families have appointments on early out days. Many families have things happening during spring break, like you've already heard. Also, what will happen to the time lost for our hourly staff, the bus drivers, the cooks, and the paraeducators who won't be working on those Fridays now? Buildings have already planned how they will be using the professional learning days and how that will fit into the plans of their school activities and assessments. We have a strong professional team at our district, and they have been planning trainings for 2-hour blocks on those early release days. It is not easy to just put 3 of those blocks together to make a full day in service. This shows an extreme lack of understanding for what the facilitators and the teacher leaders in their buildings do above and beyond their normal workday to prepare to make this professional learning job embedded. I understand the inconvenience that early outs can cause. I had those days when I forgot that the next day was an early out for my own children, and I had to make a quick call to grandparents to pick up my kids. However, education is not convenient. It is hard work, and we need to make sacrifices to do what is best for our children. The way we teach and the students we greet every day is changing, and there are going to be more and more changes in how we can meet the needs of our students. This may not happen in a 5-day week or a 6-hour day. Parents, families, and community members need to work with us to help us meet all of those needs. I would suggest we don't make any changes to our calendar for the 2014-15 school year. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Seeing none, I will close out this public hearing, and we will discuss this later on in the meeting. Next is superintendent's report.
Good evening. This evening, I'm pleased to announce that Kids on Course program is expanding to include a 3rd district school. This enrichment program is funded by the Zach Johnson Foundation and provides students with tutoring and mentoring opportunities, after-school activities, family engagement outreach, and mental health supports. The program has been active at Van Buren and Harrison elementary schools for the past 3 years. Starting this fall, Grant Elementary will join in. So wonderful to see the collaboration between the Cedar Rapids School District and Cedar Rapidian native Zach Johnson and his foundation for its continued growth. And congratulations to Zach on a great round of golf and 2nd place finish at the Deer Classic. Mine's not working, okay. And there's a photo up. Next, our spring graduation included students who participated in the Gear Up Iowa program. Some 170 students were involved in this grant-funded program beginning as 7th graders at Roosevelt and Wilson Middle School. As the program wraps up, we've produced a video to showcase the success of these students.
Gear Up Iowa was a 6-year federally funded program provided through a grant with the Iowa Student Aid Commission. The mission of the program was to significantly increase the number of low-income students who are prepared to enter and succeed in post-secondary education. 172 students started the program as 7th graders at Roosevelt and Wilson Middle Schools. Those same students recently graduated with incentives to attend a post-secondary education program of their choice. The student stories presented here spotlight only a few students and represent just a fraction of the impact the program had on Gear Up Iowa students over the past 6 years.
I just want to thank you for this opportunity, TY. I have my dreams knee high, and in case you didn't hear it, let my lyrics rewind. And I said, let's start from the beginning. My dream was to probably become a world star, a rapper, or singer. Probably it's probably like my dream. I really wanted to. I was into music a lot. Calm down, I'm just kidding. That's not Trey. Trey is humble. Rhymes will start a rumble. Just call me Tarzan, cause rap stuff is my jungle. I haven't had my real dad in my life since I was about 3 or 4. And I kind of had to be the father figure in my household for a long time. My mom helped me a tremendous amount, but I kind of grew up on my own and kind of taught myself how to go to school and kind of how to just stay focused. Gear Up just recently paid for my AP test. I took AP Environmental Science, and if I passed that, I can get college credit for that. And that paid for that. It's around like $200. They paid for the numerous college visits. They paid for the school calculators and laptops. Basically, having that money just helped me know in the back of my mind that I can do this, and I'm going to have the money to be able to pay for this, so I don't have to worry about it.
6th grade, they talked about it, and they mainly said it was a program to help us and give us money, like if we get our diploma and finish high school, and if we drop out, we don't get that money, and if we don't go to college after high school we won't get it either. In 6th grade I wanted to become a veterinarian, and now I want to be an exotic veterinarian.
She used to be in a Reading 180 program in middle school, and with the opportunity of Gear Up, she was able to have tutoring all through high school. She was able to use a personal tutor and be placed in a regular elementary or a regular English class.
Where are you going to school? Kirkwood and Iowa State. If you needed like notebooks or pencils, like you could also go there. If you wanted to sign up for the ACT, you tell them, or the AP test, you tell them, they'd pay for it.
Anytime I need something, or it was just as simple as text, sending an email saying, this is what my child needs, I can't afford this, is there any opportunity or is there any funds available for her?
All right, I'm going to send each row a question, and I want you to work on that question. You can find someone within your...
Gear Up has really been able to reduce some of the barriers. Things that would be asked of students to be successful that may not be able, the kids may not be able to get access to. A couple things that come to mind. Graphing calculators really help in the Algebra 2 class, and if we're talking about sending kids to college, then that is a great tool. Kids can be successful in the class without, but it's just a little bit harder. So Gear Up funded and allowed us to buy a bunch of graphing calculators to give to these kids to use while they're in high school. We've also have reduced the barrier of taking the payment of the ACT test, as well as AP testing. The number of kids who've taken the AP tests using Gear Up funds to pay for this during their high school experience has risen incredibly.
I'll go to Kirkwood for my pre-vet and then transfer to Iowa State or transfer to UC Davis in Sacramento, California.
Their financial aid package is being merged with their Gear Up scholarship. These kids are guaranteed a scholarship next year of $2,600. The ultimate success of Gear Up, I do believe it's a little early to tell, because while kids are saying they're going to college today, you'll have to come back and ask me this question in a year from now when I see they've gone to college. Do I believe it has helped get kids to graduation? Yes.
Then yeah, I don't even know if I would have made it to senior year without Gear Up, because basically having that it made me not want to slack, and it made me want to do something, because other people are giving me the money to go to college and take these tests and stuff, and that just made me just think, well, I need to do things right. I need to make them not regret giving me this money.
Steven, can you check in again for Trey?
I want to go to college for liberal arts, because I don't really know exactly what I want to major in. But I really want to do motivational speaking, because I know I've been through a lot, and I know I want to help kids, and I want to help kids get through what they've been through, and I want to tell them my story, and just let people know that you can come from the bottom and still work your way to the top and still go to school and accomplish things. Go ahead, pick yourself. This ain't no dang dream. This is real life. This ain't no fairy tale. And I just want money like a wishing well.
Through this grant-funded program, Cedar Rapids Community School District was able to diagnose the student barriers to higher education, facilitate the completion of a rigorous college preparatory curriculum, provide intensive academic and social support to students, implement activities to educate and inform families about the value of a post-secondary education, and guide students and families through the college search, application, and enrollment process.
All outstanding. Thank you. I think I'm on now. Finally, this evening, I am privileged to make an introduction. We were able to hire an outstanding candidate for Metro High School principal's position, and Dr. Carlos Grant is with us this evening. Please stand and introduce yourself.
Thank you for I wasn't expecting that.
We like to pull surprises on our audience people.
Thank you very much, Dr. Benson, for that. I was definitely not expecting that. I just wanted to come out and enjoy the board meeting tonight, and just enjoying so far the transition to Cedar Rapids from South Carolina. I told Madam Chairman earlier that I'm a bachelor until August the 1st because the family's still in South Carolina. And they'll be here they'll be here up in the 1st of August. But thank you for having me, and we have great plans at Metro, so look out for that, and thank you again.
Well, thank you for joining us. That's the superintendent's report this evening. Thank you.
And I just want to comment on the video and thank Justin Schaefer, Mark Benishek, and Marcia Hughes for all the videos that you produce for us throughout the year. It really tells a story and brings these experience of our students home to us. So we appreciate all the work that you do. Thank you. Board reports. Not a one. Alan?
I'd like to, but I can't. I'll wait till next time.
Next is the communications, delegations, and petitions, the opportunity to address the board, and I do have 3 requests to do so. We'll start with Lawrence Winkowski. If you could state your name and address, and you do have 5 minutes. And just for those of you who have not joined us before, this is not an opportunity for dialogue with the board. It's just the opportunity to share your opinions or concerns or thoughts with the board.
Lawrence Winkowski, 4234 Merrill Road, Northeast. First of all, I want to thank Mary Ellen and Carla for meeting with me last week about the Expanded Opportunities Program. I think we had a very productive meeting in that. With some of the money we're going to save for the backstops at Kennedy, I think it'd be great if we spent about $100 or so for some sort of timer for the speakers up here, something similar to what the city council uses. Next question I do have is, why do the meeting agendas continue to change after they're originally published online? For instance, this current agenda changed last night at 8:47, and I just question that whole process. As for activities, I think as a parent, there's a certain things that I think all activities need to have. One of them is rules. As to what is expected of the participants, what happens if you miss practice or school, or if you're injured, who participates, what's this based on? Different rules that may pertain to the particular activity. For instance, middle school tennis, 6 games are a match. So I think people need to know that when they're showing up to understand what's happening. And you also need to have rules, so one leader doesn't tell a parent that that's not my rule, but it may be the other coaches. How can you have 2 coaches for any activity that have different rules? And you can't make up rules on the fly. That just doesn't cut it. You need better communications. We're real good. With all the methods for communications we have in this district, parents should know when practices are scheduled or canceled, and that so they don't know that their child is not at practice. We should also know when events are canceled, because sometimes it does happen at the last minute, because we all hate showing up to a canceled event. And then there's always the issue of the appropriate behavior or the coaches or leaders, and that's actually the easiest one to handle. Because every school in our district has a set of guidelines for how students are supposed to interact with each other. Shouldn't the leaders of these activities be held to those same guidelines? The idea of having someone in charge putting down a family of a participant or the participant and trying to invoke or start some sort of argument or that's just inappropriate. But unfortunately, it does happen. And the other thing is, I think all Schedule C contracts should go through a rehire process every few years, so participants don't have to deal with a leader that doesn't teach the participants, a leader that doesn't that no one likes, or a leader who is only there to collect the money. Schedule C contracts should not be a guaranteed job. Reason I brought this up is on May 13th, I attended a tennis match between Roosevelt and Franklin, and it was a perfect day for tennis. 55, 20-mile-an-hour winds, and it was sort of amazing. One tennis coach was there. His team was around them, communicating. The other guy was just sitting there on the bench. And their kids really sort of didn't want anyone to do with it. But the thing that really amazed me most about this whole process was that one of the participants on the Roosevelt team was a special needs student, and she was able to participate. I hope that would happen in other schools. I'm not sure it would. And the coach was out there helping that girl and the other girl who had a player, treating them both with respect and explaining to the one, hey, you're going to have to be a little more patient. Explaining to the other girl, hey, athletes run. They don't walk. Run for the ball. And it was a very enlightening experience. And I just like to say that we need more coaches like Nick Daniel within our school district, because after talking with him and that, I was really impressed with the way he ran his team over at Roosevelt. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Jen Newman.
Jen Newman, 2051 Linden Drive Southeast in Cedar Rapids. I'm here representing the School Foundation Board, and I'd like to thank Chair Meisterling and the other directors for inviting us here again. It's been a little while since we presented, and as the school year winds down, it's actually a really busy time for the foundation. We hosted Lace Up for Learning, which was a really great event with beautiful weather, and I ran very slow. And I hope to see all of you out there running, and in fact, I challenge you to beat me. So the bar's really low. You can all do it. Lace Up for Learning was in May. Karen has been attending reunions where she captures alumni information and adds them to our newsletter, which is also a new achievement for us this year, the quarterly newsletter that goes out to alumni. Karen, how many records do we have on that list?
We have about 6,000 email addresses.
So we're sending that out quarterly. We're constantly updating that list and adding to that list and maintaining that list as well, because as you know, emails change. So we're really excited to have launched that, and everybody on the board here should have received that. If you haven't, let us know. We want to make sure you're getting that in your inbox. So let's see, reunions, Lace Up for Learning, that brings us to our Kids in the Community report for the year. So far this year, we had 89 applications. This is the field trips, if you're not familiar with it. 89 applications, covered 3,500 students, and about $17,644 dollars spent to get kids out into those experiences and make sure that they have those great experiences that we all remember having as kids when we took field trips. And also the student enrichment grants, which supports teachers. We had 92 teachers apply, affecting 12,417 students, and about $8,711 spent on that. Most recently, the Madison Elementary Summer Reading Program. This program allows students access to the library during the summer months, which really kind of breaks down barriers to transportation and allows kids to really participate in reading programs over the summer. We do this one in partnership with the Alliant Energy Foundation, and later this month we will be taking a tour of the program with Leah Rodenberg from the Alliant Energy Foundation, and we're really excited not only to show Alliant what their funds have been doing in the community, but also just kind of see the program in action. So it should be a really great opportunity. And finally, I just want to mention that we also became the fiscal agent this year, just recently, for Iowa Big Schools. And we are very excited to be able to be their partner in this new venture as well. So, anything I need to add? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next is Reverend Landry.
Good evening. Doyle Landry, 869 19th Street Southeast, President Meisterling, Directors, and Superintendent Benson. Thank you for the opportunity to address you briefly. Well, I wrote down on my sheet, African American student advancement. Honor students don't kill honor students, don't kill. As you are planning for the upcoming academic year, you have a plethora of families who are actually doing it right here in Cedar Rapids. However, they just don't get asked their opinion, meaning they're here as taxpayers, and they're producing students who want to learn because they're doing the work at home. For the upcoming academic year, and particularly in the next month, could there be a consideration, and you have many public spaces where it could take place, where you're inviting in, and it would be a pulling of the test scores and the academic grades, the results would speak for themselves. Have you ever considered, or would like the consideration of either school meetings or even a district meeting of African American families who are showing you by test scores and grades that it works if you work it? And I only bring that up because sometimes we think outside of the box. I mean, we literally go and bring in individuals from outside of Cedar Rapids, where it's nice that they're from larger urban school districts where, in spite of bullets flying, they're still producing outstanding students. But since the school year has ended and taking informal listenings, a lot of families here don't get asked their opinion. And it speaks volumes sometimes when your best solutions are kept close to the chest because people don't get asked what's working. And so in that, in terms of cross-race, both, again, President Meisterling and Ms. Mask, in receiving the current issue of Essence, focusing on education, where First Lady Michelle Obama is showing you how to raise smart kids. Notice, not how to raise smart African-American kids, because if it worked for Sasha and Malia, wouldn't it work for other kids? So if we're going to build a better school district across the board and abandon techniques that won't work simply because maybe we're unafraid to say, you know what, it's nice that you're doing okay, but raise the standards, because again, at the end of the day, it works if you work it. All the best.
Thank you. Next is our consent agenda. I'd like to entertain a motion in a second to approve.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Okay, is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion on any items in the consent agenda? Seeing none, this is a roll call action due to the personnel report.
Director Rosenthal.
Aye.
Director Humbles.
Aye.
Director Westerkamp.
Aye.
Director Witt. President Meisterling.
Next, I'm going to turn it over to Dave to talk about the 14-15 school year calendar.
Thank you. 14-15 calendar has been an interesting exercise in transparency. We have opened this back up because of the change in state law that occurred between when we approved the calendar and when we have the opportunity to institute the calendar. That law allows us to reconsider some decisions that were made because we are now on an hour basis rather than counting days. So that's the genesis of why we're here. Had the state law not changed, we couldn't be here. We would be operating under the old scenario, and no one can second guess the legislature. So the fact that it changed has led us to this point. Also, in crafting things for consideration, you can't make a negative recommendation. So at least in a formal sense. So I concur with what we have heard today regarding spring break. I would also call your attention that I believe the Jefferson Show Choir competition has always been on the same date as the Washington. So that's not a conflict. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. And the recommendation, when we started to discuss this, and the SIAC and looking at the recommendations to cut down the number of early outs. I went to Dr. Mosk, Mary Ellen Mosk, who went to the OLL, and they came back with the recommendation that we're considering. So the recommendation of administration is to collapse the three dates in the spring and the fall into one day, and in conjunction with the discussion at the board meeting 2 weeks ago, to move that date to the Friday of that week rather than Wednesday. We thought that was a good family-friendly kind of a discussion that the board held. So that's the recommendation. As far as the Teachers Association representing a view that the best calendar option for us from a professional development point of view would be to stay with the current calendar, I would concur with that. And I want to thank the association for bringing that up. But we're trying to balance what we heard back from Dr. Pickering and the SAC committee and family interests and professional development interests. So I just don't want the board in your discussion to think that there's a riff and an opinion between administration and faculty. We think frequent, ongoing professional development is better. So I appreciate Tanya for bringing that issue up. With that, you have a recommendation in front of you. I would strongly urge that we not consider moving spring break. That has just several issues, like the gentleman who presented, have come up in the intervening time, and think that we need to look at that a year out before we would move that. So we would answer any questions you have on it.
Okay, discussion. Ann?
Spring break isn't actually addressed in the motion.
Not in my recommendation, no.
Which means to me that it would stay the same.
I just wanted to, after reviewing all the comments that we had, I came to the same conclusion, so I just.
Yeah, after I looked at the issue, considered what my professional recommendation should be to the board, I am not recommending moving spring break for next year. I just think we ought to stay with the dates we've advertised.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was on the same page, thanks.
Other thoughts, comments? Nancy?
I believe it should stay as is, the spring break, and not change.
Okay.
I went to that SIAC meeting and I heard differing opinions, but what I liked about it was that we weren't afraid to make some changes that make us user-friendly, student-friendly, and that's why I like this idea of collapsing half-days into full days. I really believe it's the right thing to do. Now, if everyone agrees that this isn't the time to do it, fine, but what was very fascinating about this whole process was that we threw these things out there and we got a lot of feedback, much more we've gotten in a long time on any subject, particularly because of spring break, but what it did was it caused us to not come down in 18 months from now where someone says, well, I didn't know anything about it. So what we did was we kind of got ahead of the game here, and I feel very, very proud that we did this process the way we did, because it'll give us an opportunity in the 15-16 school year to actually do some things that we're hearing as best practices. So saying all that, spring break, obviously stay as is, as published. Your recommendation, Dr. Benson, I still like this recommendation that you have out in front of us today, because what this does is it lets us pilot what we're going to do in 15-16, which is to take the half days on Wednesdays and go to full days. I mean, that's the direction I think we're headed. And this way, some of the parents and the teachers could give us some feedback before we make that final decision. But saying that, I guess thought about the Wednesday, October we vote on the thing, so I guess we won't know much about it. There's not much of a pilot then. But my point is that this idea of having a few days picked to collapse down into one single day, I think that's a great idea, because we're going to move in that direction in the 15-16 calendar year anyway. So I could go either way.
Ann?
I like the idea of collapsing some days into full days. I don't know the ramifications for some of the hourly employees, and I don't know if you've given that thought, or is that something that has to go through some negotiation discussions? But I was also curious about why, or what's the rationale behind these days and not any days in the winter, and kind of just some of the questions that we'd heard, but also just, I guess those were the two I was that most interested me, was why these particular days and impact what our thoughts are on the hourly employees.
I think I can speak to that. And when Dr. Benson asked me what would be the dates that we would break down into the one full day, one of the things we looked at, first of all, of course, was the hours. And it would be, since those early dismissals are about 2.5 hours, really, it's 3 early dismissals for one full day. So that was kind of the first thing that we looked at. And the second part, which Tanya spoke to a little bit, is that, and Dr. Benson as well, is that frequent professional learning is probably what is supported by the research the most. So what we did is we looked at, once the school year started, there was an opportunity then on September 10th and 24th to have half-day, more frequent professional learning. And then we took the 3, which would be October 8th, 22nd, and November 6th. And what we tried to do was to just go right in the middle of that, so that, again, that the frequency wouldn't be a month out, that there wouldn't be 4 weeks in between, but rather there would be 3 weeks in between the professional learning. That was the situation in the fall. The other thing that we have to take into consideration is conference preparation. And if you look at the professional learning schedule, there's conference preparation for elementary and middle school that would have been on one of those half days. So what we'll need to do is provide a portion of that day for the conference preparation for teachers as well. So that was the situation in the fall. And then the situation in the spring, again, we thought it was appropriate. We wanted to have a good run at some frequent professional learning. In January, you have 2 dates. In February, you have 2 dates. March is always a little different because of the spring break, and we only have 1. But then we felt like that's kind of a very nice momentum for teachers during those months of January, February, and March to work through their professional learning, to continue to look at how things are going. And then as the year progresses, we begin looking at doing end-of-year reports for students and things like that, and that occupies more of their time than the professional learning. So that's why we chose those later in the year professional learning days.
Okay.
It was not scientific, but it was thought out.
Thank you. And then just one other thought. Does this apply to the modified calendar as well? The same days would be collapsed?
Correct. It's a little bit different, but we work with the principal at Taylor, and it would be their professional learning days as well. We'd take 3 half days for 1 full day.
I think the other point that you made that was made as one of the comments was some unintended consequences for some of our employee groups. We have bus drivers and paraprofessionals who typically would not work on days that are full days like that. If there are unintended consequences that disadvantage some employee group, well, we stand ready to meet with that group and talk about those consequences. And I think the district has always had kind of a, well, formally with our Teachers Association, we have a living contract mentality, and that when issues come up, we sit down and talk about them. We just don't let them fester till, quote, negotiation time. So if there are unintended consequences based on the action the board takes tonight, we're prepared to meet with those groups and to talk that through.
Thank you.
Keith?
Unrepeatedly, over the last 5 years or so, heard a lot of negative comments about the half-day in services. That creates a lot of inconvenience for parents and so on. So I think this is a good move. It's a timing issue this year, next year, but I think that is a good move. I'd also like to comment about our postal worker, that as we look at next year, that maybe we try to find as many groups. We had that was an idea I had not heard, how that's going to break out for some groups. But I think that will be a move in the right direction. to change spring break and try and get better alignment.
Okay.
That's a year from now, and that's good.
Okay, other thoughts? Okay, can I entertain a motion? I know it says voice vote, but I'd like a motion to approve the recommendation submitted by the superintendent.
So moved.
Second, please.
Second.
We're going to have a roll call action.
Director Witt? Director Westerkamp?
Aye.
Director Humbles?
Aye.
Director Rosenthal?
Aye.
President Meisterling?
Aye. So just to clarify, we will not be changing the spring break schedule from the originally published 2014-15 school calendar.
That's correct.
We will be making some changes to the professional development days. Okay, thank you for your comments.
And all those who came out to hear that discussion, we appreciate your input, and thank you.
Yep, thank you. Okay, next is, I'll turn this over to Rhoda Shepherd to give us an update on the District Blue Zones Initiative. You have a handout at your desk.
Thank you, President Meisterling, Dr. Benson, members of the board. Our Cedar Rapids community's been selected to be part of the Blue Zones project to improve well-being. Schools were asked to participate, and last year in June, you as the board adopted a resolution to state support for actions aligned to achieving the Blue Zone certification. Efforts have been underway since then throughout the year, throughout the community and the district to carry out these actions and to work to create a culture of wellness. Our individual schools are becoming designated Blue Zone schools, and we've just learned that our Educational Leadership and Support Center will be officially designated as a Blue Zones work site in the very near future. So this evening, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Stephanie Neff, who's our Community Program Manager for Blue Zone Cedar Rapids, and also Carrie Pauley from the City of Cedar Rapids. They're going to provide you an update of the status of the Blue Zones project and highlight some of the great successes that have been happening across the district.
Thank you, Rhoda.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here today. We will provide an update of the community project as a whole, specifically focusing on what schools are doing to give you a status of what's happening so far. And then certainly if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer those for you. First of all, I wanted to thank you for your support as a board. Passing the resolution was one of the key steps in moving forward with our community blueprint. I want to thank President Meisterling and Dr. Benson for serving on our advisory board, and for Rhoda for serving on the Power 9 board, which is really the group that looks at writing the blueprint for how we move forward in transforming the community to make healthy choices easier in 6 different sectors, which I'll get to in a moment. Kim Rimmer, also from the school district, serves on our leadership team. Sue Wilbur has taken the lead as the worksite administration for the ELSC's designation. And then wellness committee members at the 2 designated schools and really at schools across the district. Wellness committee members are working very hard to get these things in place. Shannon Cahoe at Viola Gibson and Deb Johnson did an outstanding job. And then Hannah White with Kids on Course at Harrison has also done excellent work there. So I will now see if I can work the... All right, there it is. So this is an overview of the community certification to date. We have 6 sectors that we work in. The first one is individual pledge actions. Hopefully everyone has completed their pledge action. That means either signing up using a paper pledge or going online, registering with the Blue Zones Project and checking I did it for one of the pledge actions. That's the key. We need 20,308 people to take that pledge. That gets us to a tipping point where there are enough people thinking about making healthy choices easier that we're actually making progress in the community. For our employers, we want 50% of our top 20 employers designated as Blue Zones work sites. I'm thrilled to say that we have met that goal for certification. However, that is just a baseline for the City of Cedar Rapids in order to truly make an impact on well-being. We have mostly the same metrics as smaller communities than us, and we're one of the larger ones. So really, our goal is to get 20 of those 20 top work sites designated. We have 20 total designated, of which the school district, this building that we're in right now is one of them. The ELSC designated at 27.5% engagement, so that's an opportunity for us to increase that with our engaged work sites, to have individuals pledged and taking one action towards making healthy choices easier. We plan to have a ribbon cutting probably before one of the board meetings in August to help celebrate that and make that more public in the community. With restaurants, we need 25% of our locally owned restaurants to move forward with designation, and we have 2 that we're working on. Those are moving a little bit more slowly than we'd like to see, but making good progress. We've had 7 out of the 6 grocery stores that we need become designated. Hy-Vee's been a great partner with the Blue Zones project and been very supportive of it, so they have all of their stores designated, and we'll have all of their drugstores as well designated. 25% of schools, I have a separate slide just on the schools, but we have 2 designated. That's 18% of our goal completed, and we're about halfway through our 3-year demonstration site project. So a little bit behind, but there's been a lot of work at the district level to support the schools, and I really see this coming school year as being a lot of forward movement with the schools. They needed to set some groundwork first, and obviously there are lots of priorities, so we appreciate the work that's been done there. And then recommended policies and recommended projects from the City of Cedar Rapids standpoint in terms of policy. We're very close to meeting that goal and expect to have that completed by the end of this month. So the District Wellness Committee has been working on a number of different things to support schools at the individual level and becoming designated. They've looked at celebrating birthdays and other events involving food once a month only. And I put the point value here just to tell you how much that supports schools in moving forward with designation. Discontinuing using food or food coupons as rewards or incentives. Requiring that students are physically active during the majority time in physical education class, and ensuring that physical activity is not used for or withheld as a punishment. So by implementing building level policies in these areas with support of the district, and it really depends on the building, I think that the District Wellness Committee has done a nice job of setting that stage, but really giving the individual buildings the flexibility to do what works with their schedules and what works with the way that they operate. So they have the opportunity to implement things that will be effective in their schools, but it also provides schools with 10 of the 54 points, which is 19% of what they need for designation. So here's our 2 designated schools, Viola Gibson and Harrison. I think they got designated about a week apart from each other. Some of the things that Viola Gibson did, and there they are. They had a big, huge assembly where the kids all cheered and they got to hold a banner up. They removed food actually from all of their celebrations at Gibson, and they did a nice little video for that, and that was going way above and beyond what was sort of in the best practices for schools. And they really found that the kids didn't notice, and it didn't matter to them. They did fun activities, they engaged the kids a little bit more, and they still celebrated, they still had a great time. So kudos to them for taking that extra step. They implemented a Mind Up curriculum to teach mindfulness in students, and that was very effective as well. They put in a school garden, and they completed a walking school bus pilot project, and they'll be implementing hopefully a full project this fall. Carrie's going to talk a little bit about that program, but basically it's walking with adult volunteers in groups of children to help kids get to school safely and on time and ready to learn, get them some physical activity before they even start their day. Oops. Harrison, I just clicked that, so it might go. But Harrison Elementary redesigned their school lunchroom using smarterlunchrooms.org. They did a few things there to promote the healthy choices that they have in their lunchroom. They used their urban garden to create a farm-to-school program and are serving fresh vegetables out of the garden to students in the school. And they also completed a walking school bus pilot. So I'll hand it, oh, I might have missed that one too, but hand it over to Carrie here.
What one? Oh, okay.
It may flip on you.
Okay. I just wanted to give you an update on the Walking School Bus Program, and the reason I'm here is I'm a co-chair on the Walking School Bus Committee associated with Blue Zones. And we help facilitate 6 different pilot programs, either on a week-long basis or on a one-day-a-week basis this past spring. And you can see the You can see those on the slide that Stephanie's trying to pull up. Of those, there were Viola Gibson, Harrison, Garfield, Van Buren, Nixon, and then Bowman Woods, it was just in the Lindmar School District. They all completed programs, and we had fairly good participation in those programs. 2 other schools have permanent programs, meaning they operate on a continual basis, and those are Jackson and Erskine, and they'll be continuing their programs in the fall. And all 6 of the pilot programs have expressed interest in continuing as a permanent program in the fall, so we're working with them to try and implement their permanent program this fall. We also, as part of this pilot program, we encourage the schools the programs to send out surveys and to see what could be done to benefit or help the program and to see what's good about the program. And 30 surveys were returned total. 100% of the parents felt that their children were safe, which is obviously a really good thing about these programs. And 90% of them wanted them to be permanent. So they were convenient enough that it was a good thing and they wanted to keep them going. And the benefits of the walking school bus program are shown on the bar graph below, and in the slide transfer, 2 of them kind of don't show up, but I'll talk about them anyway. So one of the biggest, most pleasant surprises is the better sense of community, because that's not really an obvious benefit that you think of when you think of a walking school bus program, but 70% of the parents felt that their children had better sense of community. And we had a lot of community members that and celebrities that helped us with the program. Some of the school board members also participated in the programs, and there's a lot of cross-generational interaction, and kids really are aware of their surroundings. So it's really great for the kids, and obviously another one is healthier, more active children. That's one of the more obvious benefits that you think about. The 43% line item was convenience of getting their kids to school, because they get to drop their kids off earlier and know that they're safe, and you don't have to fight the traffic line. And child is more alert at school, and children fall asleep faster at night. Those are the other 2 benefits that we're seeing. So we really like our progress in walking school buses, and we're working on starting up more pilot programs this fall. So.
Thanks, Carrie. And as you know, the project really relies heavily on volunteers, and so we really appreciate Carrie and all the leadership team and Power 9 board members' time to work on moving this forward. So some of the next steps for the district, our goals in the blueprint are to designate a minimum of 8 schools, that's just in the Cedar Rapids district, before October of 2015, so that would be next school year. Implementing a permanent walking school bus in at least 7 additional schools, in addition to the 2 we have now. Increasing staff and high school student engagement. I mentioned that earlier, that designating, you need 25% engagement to designate as a work site. We'd like to get those designated work sites up to at least 50% engagement. Research tells us that having engaged employees increases productivity and has all kinds of other benefits and value, and so we want to really make sure that as many people in work sites are being touched as they possibly can, and the Blue Zones Pledge is one way to effectively do that and help people think about their well-being a little differently. Continuing to identify district-level wellness policies to support school implementation. Just to reiterate that the District Wellness Council has done a great job of doing that and will continue to do that moving forward. Implementing the Blue Zones Challenge in middle schools in fall of 2015. That's kind of a fun way to get students engaged. The pledge actions are a little bit more geared toward the elementary school level, so sometimes in high schools we work on more of the engagement strategy, because they don't have a lot of flexibility with implementing some of the pledge actions. So you're going to see more elementary schools getting designated. Middle schools, we can really implement a Blue Zones kind of challenge curriculum, and then high schools focus on the engagement. And then also tracking metrics that demonstrate impact. We've really switched our focus now. We're starting to look at sustainability of the program. Wellmark has invested about $1 million over 3 years into this community to help us achieve this baseline goal. But really in Cedar Rapids, we need a lot greater, we need to push ourselves a little bit further to really have the impact on well-being that we want to see 5-10 years down the road. So this is them helping us set the foundation, and then we need to move that forward a little bit more. So hoping to see some BMI data from the schools start to change, more students walking to school, and increased number of school gardens. So thank you for your time today. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments for Stephanie or Carrie?
So to get the students involved in the program, how do you get them involved to participate in the walking school bus program?
In walking school, do you want to talk about that?
It's really, we try to engage the individual schools committees to try and help market, and there are a lot of different ways to market the program. A lot of times, we encourage them to go through the teachers, and the teachers can kind of hype up the program. We'd have flyers, which obviously go out to the parents, and the parents would sign their children up. But the schools have really been great to work with, and they really encourage the program, and so that's kind of how kids get to know about it. And then when they hear about other kids doing it, then then obviously word of mouth works that way too, so.
Yeah, that peer pressure is huge. That first day, we give them all Blue Zones t-shirts, and they all walk and arrive as a group, and the rest of the kids go, wow, I want to do that too. So you kind of tend to pick up a few kids along the way, so it's great. It's really exciting for them. They just love it.
And then we get great celebrities. Chairman Weister.
I think they were disappointed when I came, but it's okay. They didn't know who I was. Ann?
Yeah, I was just wondering, the second page of the PowerPoint, the 25% of schools. So now, is this just within the Cedar Rapids city limits, or I'm just trying to do the math here, because we have a couple schools in Hiawatha, so they don't count?
Right, so what we did is we looked at all of the schools in the Cedar Rapids district, and then we looked at a couple of schools in Linn-Mar and in obviously College Community too. And we looked at their enrollment, the zip codes of their enrollment, and we found actually that there were two schools, Bowman Woods and Westfield and Linn-Mar, who had more than 50% of Cedar Rapids students that were enrolled in those two schools. And then all of the Cedar Rapids schools, even your Hiawatha schools, have more than 50% enrollment from Cedar Rapids zip codes. And then all of College Community schools also have more than 50% of their kids coming from Cedar Rapids.
I just kind of was wondering where the 40 came from.
Yes, so that's how we defined that. And then Marion is working with Marion Independent and Linn-Mar too, so we're both kind of crossing over a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other comments? Ellen?
Stephanie, I know you're coming to Rotary on Monday to speak to our group of 350 members, so thank you for doing that. One thing that we've been talking about for a long time is neighborhood schools and how to leverage the asset that we have. And this walking school bus is definitely one. I can see Erskine, Grantwood, and Hiawatha, for that matter. Elementary schools seem like they'd be easier. Is that right? Elementary schools versus trying to say, let's do it at Franklin Middle School. It becomes a little weird, I guess, for the kids to do it at the middle school.
Yeah, they're a little bit more resistant to that. I think it would work at a middle school level. I certainly think that we're not against trying it at a middle school level. The elementary schools just seem more receptive to it. Parents are a little bit more engaged with the younger kids because they feel like, it's a good option for them to get their kids to school safely. So certainly if a middle school was interested, we could absolutely implement a program. But we've had plenty of schools come to us and ask to be involved in the walking school bus program. So it's really gained some momentum. We haven't had to do a lot of going out and finding the schools to implement programs. They're coming and saying, we'd really like this to happen at our school. So,
Great report. Thank you so much for your efforts. Yes, Dave?
Yeah, just two things. One, Stephanie, thank you. I know you're a champion. I get a chance to meet with you, and you're championing this within the community, so we certainly appreciate that. Also, from the community point of view, none of this would happen without the support of the mayor, Mayor Corbett, and the city council. So we should acknowledge their leadership. The school district wants to play its part in the community process, but certainly the mayor and city council need to be commended for their visionary leadership in that. And finally, our own champion, Rhoda Shepard, would like to thank her for working with our wellness committees and taking on the challenge along with HR.
Sue Welber.
Sue?
Yep.
Back here. Thank you. So it's a real team effort.
Yep. Thank you. We appreciate the update. Thanks, Carrie. Rhoda.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Okay, next is the District Audit Committee report, and I will turn this over to Steve Graham.
President Meisterling, Dr. Benson, members of the Board of Education, it's my pleasure to introduce two members of our audit committee to provide the annual report. And while Barb Harms will be number one, I guess, here, and Patrick Courtney, members of our audit committee, will be doing the presentation. And I also want to make note of Bridget Wood, who's also an audit committee member, giving us moral support, I think, today. So at any rate, welcome, and without further ado.
Thank you for having us tonight. I guess I'm a little bit surprised. I was kind of expecting that maybe the press and the members of public were here to hear the audit committee report. But yes, that's not the case. The audit committee was originally formed based on a report card commission recommendation a number of years ago. Has evolved over the years into a pretty formal structure with the support of the board. The real role of the audit committee is to support an independent review and oversight of the district's financial reporting processes, internal controls, and also the independent audit process. The membership of our committee, which is on Exhibit A of your packet, you can see the list of members. We have 9 community members, as well as the one member of the Board of Education. Gary Anhalt has been serving in the ex officio capacity for this past year. The members are expected to have business expertise, specifically governmental financial reporting knowledge and auditing, familiarity with the auditing process. So you can see the membership. Tom Hoffman has actually served as the chair this past year, and he helped prepare this report but was not able to make it tonight, so I'm kind of filling in for Tom. He also was unanimously elected to serve as chair for next year, so he did a fantastic job. We will have one new member for next year. The committee has approved Gary Becker, the Senior Vice President of Commercial Banking at Cedar Rapids Bank and Trust, as a new member beginning in September. And then the specific responsibilities of the committee, there's a very detailed written charter and a matrix version in your packet that we have continuously updated over the number of years, so that's Exhibits B and C. The only other thing I'm going to touch on is one requirement of our charter is that the committee review our own performance each year, and we have used a self-assessment tool to do that for a number of years, and the committee has always reviewed that, but this year we decided to provide that summary to the board, so that is the last couple of pages in your packet. We look at, it's scored, each item that we ask our committee members about is scored on a 1 to 5 scale. So we look at the numerical scale, but more valuable we feel are the comments that we ask our committee members to comment on how they feel the committee functioned during the past year. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pat, who's just going to hit on some highlights from this past year.
Thanks, Barb. I'm going to cover a few of the current highlights that occurred in the past year as far as the audit committee was concerned. First of all, the board reviewed the audit request proposal. Currently, in the past, the review of an audit proposal was every 3 years, and a lot of the committee members felt that that was a little too short of a period because a lot of the people who are involved in the accounting aspect thought that there is a learning curve with respect to any particular audit, and that realistically we should probably extend that out to 5 years. I think Steve followed up with several other school districts and kind of determined that 5 years was the current pattern for requesting proposals. Of course, it's always up to the board to determine what contracts or what period of contracts are basically going to be used. Right now, we're coming off a 3-year contract that has been extended for another 2 years with our current auditor, independent auditor. So right now, the matrix has basically been revised to reflect a 5-year type of program. One of the areas that I think the survey indicated in prior reports is that we were probably not spending enough time looking at I guess the informational technology and potential security interests, security programs with respect to the district. So this past year in September, and again this year, there was a presentation both by a representative of the Cedar Rapids School board, or school audit staff and the Grant Wood Area Agency with regard to the redundancies and the programs in place to protect the technology of the Cedar Rapids School District. And that included also information with regard to access to the school data, computer access. And so I think the audit committee felt that this was an area that we needed to probably continue to monitor in light of a lot of the hacking or other issues that go on that we've heard so much about. So that was one area that we will continue to try to focus on, and I indicated we do have an updated report coming out in September. One area that we always look at is the district's insurance policies or insurance program. This past year, we received a report from the insurance carrier or agency, and we reviewed that. And one of the areas that is continuing a cost increase is the workers' compensation area. And the insurance agency with the district and staff have implemented a program trying to deal with the ever-increasing number of workers' comp claims and the cost going forward with respect to the district, because this is a major issue because the district does self-insure to a large extent with regard to that. So anything that can be done to reduce that exposure and that cost and the number of claims that are going forward is significant. So, and again, that will come up again in next time. We always do that every year, usually in September, and we will try to follow up and figure out and know kind of what is happening with regard to that program. The final thing with respect to the independent auditors is receiving their report and reviewing that with them to determine any areas of concern. And again, the independent auditors issued a clean or unmodified report again this year. And they basically advised that we really had no major deficiencies, a few minor internal control type issues which pop up on, maybe somebody didn't, cross-check an invoice or to a particular bill, but generally everything was in very good shape. The other aspect of, in addition to the independent auditor's report, is the school district does engage in having a activity fund audit in light of the issues in the past where there had been some issues with respect to embezzlement. The school district has continued to have an activity fund audit for Kingston, the high schools, middle schools, and one or two of the middle schools on a rotating basis. And I think what we've determined in talking with the independent auditors is that I think we're making substantial improvements in that area. And I think principally that's due to the cash management program that Steve has implemented across the district with respect to the schools, and then following up as new employees or other people come in, having new training program put in place so everybody understands that when they receive that cash or that check, this is the type of documentation that they need to provide to this district to make sure that all of the funds and the cash that come in is being properly accounted for and reflected. So I think those were kind of the highlights of what transpired this year as far as the audit committee was concerned. I don't know if there's any questions. Barb or I would be glad to try to answer anything that you may have.
Questions or comments? Keith?
I have a comment. I mean, this is really important for the district. We really appreciate what you're doing because it assures the board that time is being spent in detail by people that truly understand it, and hopefully gives a lot of confidence to the community as well.
And I guess I'd like to say, Director Anholt was present at all of our meetings and very active. Usually after the audit committee meetings, we always go into executive session and we discuss any issues or concerns that we have, and And Director Anhalt stays there and is present for those presentations, and basically, it's been a relatively clean and simple year as far as the audit committee was concerned.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you so much, Pat, Barb, Bridget, for coming out and spending time with us this evening. It does give us the reassurance, and I hope the community is reassured as well, to have business professionals from outside the district taking a look. So thanks for your time on the committee, and please thank the rest of the committee for
We
us
will.
as well.
Thank you very much.
Mhm. I'm going to turn this over to Paul Hayes to talk about our suspension and expulsion report.
Good evening. I was asked to provide a brief update on current and future efforts underway in the district to address some of our exclusionary practices of expulsion and suspension, starting with, that's the wrong one.
Is that the wrong PowerPoint?
It's the wrong PowerPoint.
Okay. We're going to give Mark a few minutes to pull up the right one.
Yeah. Entertain you for a little bit?
Would you? We're all staring at you.
Yeah. I was joking with someone earlier about that first video. I got a great face for radio.
You can go ahead and start without, you can
Okay.
catch up.
Well, in regard to our expulsions, we really don't expel many students. Over the last 3 years, we've gone from 6 to 4 to 2 expulsions in the district. And I think that's largely due to our use of Polk Alternative Education Center as an alternative to cutting ties with students and families. And because we're able to maintain that academic continuity for students, we're often able to reintegrate them into their homeschool or another setting where they're able to finish their education. This first one on suspensions illustrates the number of students and the suspensions represented by them. So, for example, in 2013, 2014, there were 1,220 students who received suspensions, but there was a total of 2,460 suspensions. So 1,220 students received at least one suspension during that school year. And you'll notice that these totals are declining over the years.
Can I jump in there for a second?
Sure.
Paul? For Mary, this was one of the most impressive graphics, I thought, because the piece of information I couldn't see here are these repeat offenders. Because sometimes, you see these numbers and you think, oh my gosh, this is incredible number of suspensions.
Right.
But yet, if it's the same person 3 times, so is there a way to?
Like repeating from year to year?
Yeah, well, just even the given year, the 2,460 actually could be,
Yeah.
the same person over and over.
We are able to identify which students are receiving what number of suspensions.
Okay.
So
That'd be
we can dig
interesting to
down
know.
to that
Yeah.
level.
Thank you.
And this is K-12.
Correct.
Thank you.
The next slide illustrates the number of suspensions by grade level. Again, you'll notice a general decline at the elementary and middle school levels where we have focused efforts to address climate and behavior. We do have some disparities that this slide illustrates, and these mirror the disparities across the state and the nation. In looking at, for example, our African-American student population, we have nearly 15% students, African-American students in the population, but the suspensions are 38% of the suspensions were served by African-American students. So that disparity is something that we are working on and looking at what are the causes of that and what are some strategies that we can implement to address those things. To get to that, the Department of Education in January, came out with a set of guiding principles for districts to take a look at to address those very issues. And these guiding principles, starting with climate and prevention, this refers to the attitudes and beliefs that exist in a building that make it feel like a safe and welcoming place. You are all familiar with Doing Our Part curriculum that includes lessons to teach students the value of personal best, active listening, respect, responsibility, and trustworthiness. There are 12 lessons taught at each grade level, pre-K through 8, and this is becoming the common language in all of our elementary and middle schools. Positive behavior intervention supports builds upon the part lessons and explicitly teaches student expectations, how to behave in every area of the building, but more importantly, it helps the adults in the building to know that their efforts are paying off by providing some very clear data sources and effectiveness measures. SPIRIT, or Student Problem Identification Resolution of Issues, is a program that we're going to be piloting at Washington High School in the fall with the help of the Department of Justice. And this involves training students to be the voice of their school and to have a hand in addressing the issues that they see as important to the culture of that building. So again, we'll be piloting that at Washington High School in the fall. The next principle involves making sure that expectations and consequences for the behavior are understood by all. I've already spoken about PBIS and what role this plays, but so that we don't rely too heavily on a zero-tolerance approach to discipline, all of our administrators at every building will be participating in a workshop on August 11th to learn about restorative justice. Restorative justice puts the ownership of the behavior on the student and prompts compassion for those who have been harmed by the student's behavior and explores with the student ways that they can restore their standing in the eyes of those around them. Finally, the third principle, diversity or equity and continuous improvement, involves using the data that we have available to us to focus our efforts where the data leads us. For example, to address the disparity illustrated in one of the slides, we are collaborating with the Juvenile Court, Cedar Rapids Police Department, and Human Services to identify and implement alternatives to pushing students into that juvenile justice and human services arena. I've asked Ken Morris Jr., our Manager of Student Equity, to join us tonight to talk to you about a couple of additional initiatives that we're implementing in this area.
Thank you, Paul. I know President Meisterling had an opportunity at another meeting to hear me go on about one of our most recent initiatives out of the Diversity Committee called our Equity Walks. And I have a real bad tendency to just ramble and I get excited and go on and on and get off topic. So to be conscious of our time, if you all forgive me, I'm going to just read from my script here and give you all the protocol and then open it up to questions. The rationale, simply, the event of Common Core standards has driven districts, schools, and classrooms to transform their educational efforts to meet the needs of all students. The educational, business, and local communities will need to work together to ensure cultural, racial, and linguistic inclusiveness to close the opportunity gaps that continue to exist. Identifying and responding to the diversity of school districts must be on the forefront of educational leaders and policymakers. Therefore, implementing and evaluating successful methodologies must be attained to meet the requirements of the district's strategic plan for students' academic success. One effort to operationalize the Diversity Committee's action plan for closing the opportunity gap for targeted student populations, Latino, African American, LGBTQ, and low-income students is the use of the Diversity Equity Walk Protocol. The design and implementation will provide key data for district and site leaders. The Equity Walk Protocol will lead district community members in obtaining feedback on the culture and the classroom learning environments. So in essence, we have this wonderful committee that's comprised of district employees and community members. And in working with our consultant, Dr. Edwin Javis, he's helped us to develop this series of walks that we will do, what we plan to do in all the schools for the upcoming academic year. We had the opportunity to pilot the walks at 2 schools, at Harding and at Roosevelt. It's kind of like a beta test, and we got some really great feedback that we was able to share with the principals, who then were able to share it with the rest of the buildings in some of the classrooms that we went in, going through and not so much observing or observing, but not evaluating, going through and looking with a cultural lens versus just looking specifically at teaching, but looking at the classroom environment and looking for the cultural responsiveness of the schools, and in addition to looking for really good educational best practices. Did I hit it? All right. So at this point, I know I said a whole lot and Paul shared a lot, so I want to open it up to you all for questions.
Okay, comments or questions? Nancy?
So, when you're doing your walks through the schools, are you meeting with teachers? Are you talking to the students?
Yeah, right now what we did was we met, we spent, I believe it was 2 hours in every building. And we spent, and in that 2 hours, I want to say we did to 8 to 10 classrooms, and including the hallways, libraries, lunchrooms, that kind of thing. And we, during this pilot, we didn't interact with students. We just were trying to be flies on the wall, if you will. And there was some questions going into it, because people thought that, well, everyone will change their behavior, you won't get accurate data. And we found that that was more so for the adults. The students seen us for a couple of minutes, and then they went back into their normal routine. And so we were old news, and which allowed us to get some really good data that we could give back to a quick turnaround. And one way we did that, we gave thank you cards to all the teachers in the classrooms that we visited to let them know something that we learned from them during that time. And then afterwards, we processed and did what we called glows and grows. And you know, what was one thing that we took away that impressed us, and what's one of our wonderings that we would have about what we saw in that classroom or the building.
Okay, other questions or comments? Yeah?
I like the word opportunity gap. Could you talk about that? We have one of our goals is closing the achievement gap as a board, and I've been on here 3 years, and I'm not really clear on opportunity gap versus achievement gap versus what that means.
Sure, and I think it goes to something that Reverend Landry had said earlier when we talk about all students. Yes, I mean the data that Paul shared, it was very clear that we have some work to do in specific racialized categories, but opportunity in that we want all our students to succeed, very much like the mission of our district, and excellence for all. And so that's how I interpret the opportunity gaps that exist for students that students that fit in some of those historical underrepresented categories, as well as those that don't, but they may not have, they may have some coming from some deficiencies or what have you, from whatever home environment that may not necessarily, they may not fit in that underserved category, but they still need the same amount of love and attention that we're going to provide for them. So that's how I interpret it.
Thank you.
Yep. Other questions or comments? Thanks for the report. This is important work in our district, and we appreciate the time, attention, and devotion that you have towards it. We're also very appreciative that we do have Polk. It does provide a safe and consistent environment for these kids instead of spreading them all over the city of Cedar Rapids. So a lot of good things came when we closed Polk, and this is certainly one of them. So thank you for your work. We appreciate it. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Ann Rosenthal and Laurel Day to talk about 2015 IASB legislative platform.
So would that be me, right? Okay.
Yes, it
Well, you
was.
said Laurel and Ann, so I wasn't really sure.
The notes and submitting it for the board.
So in the board book was the list of all the actions from this current year, as well as some discussion, a summary of legislative action. And so I'm hoping you review that. I do have some that I would recommend. Some are the same as last year and some are different. So why don't I start with that, and then we'll have open discussion. So last year, let's see, there's item 11, if you scroll down to 38.3. That was one of last year's priorities that the ISB selected, and I would recommend that we continue that. That has to do with reform of Iowa's K-12 education system and talking about research-based and focusing on student achievement. And then just going in order, I would add number 13, which is supporting of development and funding for research on best practice for early literacy. So I would just recommend that we put that as a priority, the early literacy strategies. Number 14 is one that was last year's priority, and I would recommend keeping that. That's saying that we set that the state should set the supplemental state aid by the date specified in the code and at a rate that encourages continuous improvement and reflects actual increases. So that's number 14. And then I would suggest we add number 19. 19 is basically a platform or a resolution that provides flexibility. And we've talked before about supporting home rule, and this includes that phrase that it's basically more flexibility for school districts to meet our needs and becoming more efficient, including support of home rule. And then the other one that was also a priority last year that I would recommend we continue to support would be number 20, which is supporting the repeal of the mandatory start date. I think most of the districts in Iowa submit an annual exemption to that. So the fact that we have a mandatory date is fairly irrelevant. So anyway, those are the 5 that I would suggest, and I would open it up to any other comments or discussion.
Comments or questions, discussion? Anyone had any others that they were particularly feeling strong about?
I think you have to look at this as the position of the Iowa Association of School Boards. So if there's any there that you don't agree with or whatever, I think we need to move that forward too, because when a legislator asks what's the position of the school districts on this, all of these become very important. So be sure to read them. And maybe if we could get this possibly posted, so people could see what our positions are on these issues.
Sure. We can add that to the website.
So let me understand something. This is going to the IASB, and they're going to take all the information and come up with the 5 priorities for this next legislative session. It may not be the 5 that we just spoke about. We all got to get behind those 5 when it happens. But for now, we're offering our vote of support. The only one I think is number 20, that school start date. Since I've lived here for 14 years, it hasn't played an issue in the school districts. In other words, if that's a giveaway. If in my boat, that school start date doesn't ever affect us. So
Well,
why
it
even
almost did.
why even discuss it? Well, I know,
It
but
almost did.
And it may in the future. And I think the legislature is talking more and more about that.
About not having exemptions.
Right.
Yeah.
About eliminating all exemptions.
really, okay.
They talked a lot about it last session.
So we
Nancy?
can only submit 5 from the top?
Remains as position statements, as Keith said, but those are the ones that they really kind of start to focus on. But again, you're absolutely right, Alan. We've submitted 5 before, and they haven't picked up our 5. Because they rehash it when they receive all of the priority statements from all the districts. I think there is someone on the board we know.
Well, actually, there is a legislative committee, and that's not necessarily all the members of the board.
True.
It does come down to the board, though.
So that committee makes the recommendation to the board.
But again, these positions are really important, that if a legislator has something, here's what our position is. And you'll see that at the end of the year on, where people voted.
Where it fell. Mhm.
I guess my only other comment is there's a lot of debate on to whether the national standards in the Iowa core is really in the best interest of students. And it's hard to predict what may happen in the future with that. And so item 3 actually uses the phrase Iowa core a couple times. And I'm more comfortable with leaving it open and just saying that we support progress in the development of rigorous standards and benchmarks focused on improving student achievement. I guess I have a hard time understanding why the phrase Iowa core is essential to this and why it's not just a broader statement of focusing on rigorous standards and benchmarks.
I think it brings commonality to those rigorous standards and benchmarks so that a district in the west side of the state doesn't have their standards and benchmarks that are very different than the ones somewhere else. So there's at least a common, consistent core of education that all students must know.
It is odd. The thing that I'm fascinated by is the average ACT score for the state is 21, and our average is 27 or 26, depending on what year it is. And so those people need to align to the Iowa core, not us. I mean, it's sad, but it's true. They're not setting the bar high enough.
What, do you have comments, Dave?
No, the governor has made it crystal clear in some of his remarks that he is supporting the Iowa core, and I view this as a reflection of the political reality. He's going to be governor the next 2 years. He is saying we in Iowa need to control our own destiny regarding standards, and so the inclusion of Iowa core language derived from that position. And certainly I would support the Iowa core. It's well aligned with the work that we're doing.
Okay. So regarding the 5, any other comments on the 5 I suggested?
Can you repeat them for me? And I have 3.
No, it's 11, 13. So 11 is the K-12 reform, 13 is early literacy strategies, 14 is supplemental state aid, 19 is the flexibility and efficiency, and 20 is repealing the mandatory start date.
Okay, thank you.
Are we prepared to go ahead and make a motion to accept those as our 5 priorities? Okay, can I entertain one?
So I'll make a motion that we accept these 5 as our priorities.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, so we'll go ahead and submit those. And
You're welcome.
And I agree with Keith. If there's anything in there that you really feel strongly about or disagree with, we need to communicate that as well. Okay. Next, we're going to go ahead and appoint a school district secretary. I'd like to entertain a motion to accept this resolution. And when you make a motion, can you please read the resolution?
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution for the appointment of the Secretary of the Board of Directors of the Cedar Rapids Community School District in the County of Lynn, State of Iowa. And that it be, do I keep going? Say that it's Laurel Day.
Yes.
Laurel Day be appointed as Secretary of the Board of Directors for a term of 1 year, beginning July 14th, and shall qualify for said appointment by taking the oath of office in the manner required by Section 277.28, and thereafter shall hold office until a successor is appointed and qualified.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Okay, Laurel, you want to come up and I'll read you the oath of office. This is good. You want to raise your right hand? You will support the Constitution.
I do.
Thank you, Laurel. Okay, we're going to do the same thing with the appointment of the school district treasurer. Ann, do you want to go ahead and read that?
Sure, I have practice. So I make a motion that we pass a resolution for the appointment of treasurer of the Board of Directors of the Cedar Rapids Community School District in the County of Lynn, State of Iowa, and that we appoint Steve Graham that he would be appointed as our treasurer of the Board of Directors for a term of 1 year, beginning July 14th, 2014, and shall qualify for said appointment by taking the oath of office in the manner required by Section 277.28, and thereafter shall hold office until a successor is appointed and qualified.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Steve, you want to come up here? Next, for human resources. Stipulation of substitute teacher pay for 2014-15. Dave?
Yes, thank you. Jill is attending a professional meeting in Des Moines and unable to attend tonight. In your board packet, there is a stipulation of substitute teacher pay for 14-15. The recommendation is to continue the current rates that are in place in 13-14 into 14-15, and administration would make that recommendation to the board.
Okay, any comments, questions, or discussion? Can I entertain a motion to accept the recommendation?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Same sign. Okay, thank you. I do want to say before we close the meeting tonight that we very much appreciate those who sent in comments regarding the calendar and the professional development days. We always try to engage as many people as we can when we make decisions, and we had the opportunity to open up the calendar and look at things a little bit differently. And so, again, we appreciate it. We got a lot of good comments, a lot of good feedback, and we really like that. We want to encourage more of that. So, have a great night. We stand adjourned.
Good, how you doing?